Blood draining from her face, flight attendant Melissa Bailey watches in horror as Terrence Washington approaches, not as a random passenger, but as SkyWest Airlines CEO. The same man whose 16-year-old daughter she just had security detained for suspicious behavior minutes before boarding finished. Before we dive into this shocking story of racial profiling at 30,000 feet, where are you watching from today? If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button to join our community fighting for justice. Drop a like if you've ever witnessed discrimination in public spaces. Now, let's unpack how an ordinary travel day turned into a nightmare for a black teenager with a passion for aviation, and the reckoning that followed when her powerful father stepped in. The digital alarm clock flashed 5:30 a.m. when Jasmine Washington's eyes fluttered open. Unlike most teenagers who'd grown at such an early hour, Jasmine sprang up with excitement. Today marked her first solo flight, a trip to visit her grandmother in Atlanta, and the anticipation had kept her tossing and turning all night. Today's the day, she whispered to herself, running her fingers over the ticket folder on her nightstand. The folder contained a first-class ticket, a 16th birthday gift from her father 3 months ago. Jasmine still remembered the moment perfectly. Her father, Terrence Washington, had handed her a model airplane with the ticket tucked inside its tiny cargo hold. "You're growing up," he'd said, his voice catching slightly. "Time for a bit more independence. Your grandmother misses you, and I think you're ready to make this trip on your own." What made the gift even more special was their shared love of aviation. Terrence Washington hadn't always been SkyWest Airlines CEO. 25 years ago, he started as a baggage handler, working grueling shifts while putting himself through night school. Through determination and brilliance, he climbed the corporate ladder, ramp supervisor, operations manager, regional director, vice president of operations, and finally, 3 years ago, CEO. Jasmine had grown up surrounded by aviation. Her bedroom walls displayed framed vintage airline advertisements instead of pop stars. Her bookshelf overflowed with aviation histories and technical manuals rather than typical young adult fiction. She could identify most commercial aircraft by their silhouettes alone and knew the basics of aerodynamics better than most adult passengers. Stepping into her bathroom, Jasmine began her morning routine. As she brushed her teeth, she mentally reviewed the SkyWest fleet specifications she'd been studying. The company primarily operated Bombardier CRJ-200S and Embraer 175s for their regional routes. Her flight today would be on an Airbus A320, one of the newer additions to the fleet. After showering, Jasmine stood before her closet, contemplating what to wear. Comfort was key for the 2-hour flight, so she selected her favorite navy blue hoodie with a subtle airplane embroidered on the pocket, a pair of well-worn jeans, and her lucky white sneakers. The outfit was casual but neat. Exactly what any sensible traveler would choose. As she dressed, Jasmine could hear her father moving around downstairs, preparing breakfast. Her mother, Diana, was away on a business trip in Europe, a fact that had almost caused her father to postpone Jasmine's solo journey. But Jasmine had insisted she was ready, and eventually, he relented. "Morning, aviation expert," Terrence greeted her as she entered the kitchen. He was already dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, his SkyWest ID badge clipped to his pocket. Despite being CEO, Terrence never flaunted his position. Most of the airline's employees knew him by his trademark humility and hands-on leadership style. "Morning, Dad," Jasmine replied, accepting the plate of scrambled eggs and toast he offered. "You didn't have to dress up just to drop me at the airport." Terrence chuckled. "Not for you, sweetheart. I've got a meeting with the board and some potential investors at the international terminal. That's why I can't stay until you're boarding, but I promise to check on you before your flight leaves." "Dad, I'll be fine," Jasmine insisted, though secretly she appreciated knowing he'd be somewhere in the same airport. "I've been through MSP 100 times with you and Mom." I know, Terrence said, raising his hands in surrender. Just dad instincts kicking in. As they ate breakfast, Terrence quizzed Jasmine on emergency procedures and airline protocols, not out of worry, but because it was their shared language of love. Jasmine answered each question confidently, occasionally correcting her father on updated regulations, making him beam with pride. After breakfast, Jasmine retrieved her special backpack, a high-quality navy blue bag covered with aviation pins that Terrence had collected for her from airports around the world. Inside, she packed her essentials, her favorite aviation magazine, a notebook for documenting her observations of the flight operations, her phone charger, headphones, wallet, and a small framed photo of her family that always traveled with her. The drive to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport was filled with their usual aviation banter. Terrence shared stories about the early days of his career, and Jasmine talked about her dream of becoming an aerospace engineer, designing the commercial aircraft of the future. As they approached the departures level, Jasmine noticed her father's hands tightening on the steering wheel, a subtle tell that he was nervous. "Dad, seriously, I've got this," she reassured him. Terrence sighed, pulling into a drop-off spot. "I know you do. Text me when you're through security and at the gate, okay? My meeting should wrap up around the time of your boarding, so I'll try to swing by." "You don't have to." "I want to," he insisted. "Besides, what's the point of being CEO if I can't check on my favorite passenger?" They shared a laugh as he helped her with her small suitcase. Before parting ways, Terrence pulled Jasmine into a tight hug. "Love you, Jazz. Make good choices. Love you too, Dad. Don't terrorize any executives today." As Jasmine walked into the terminal, she could feel her father watching until she disappeared through the sliding doors. Despite her outward confidence, a flutter of nervousness tickled her stomach. She'd flown dozens of times, but always with family or on school trips. This was different, a small but significant step toward adulthood. Inside the bustling terminal, Jasmine navigated toward the SkyWest check-in counters. She noticed a few curious glances from other travelers. A young black girl traveling alone often drew attention, not all of it kind. An older white couple whispered to each other as she passed, and Jasmine pretended not to notice. Her parents had prepared her for these moments, teaching her to hold her head high and focus on her destination. At the check-in kiosk, Jasmine expertly entered her information, printed her boarding pass, and tagged her small suitcase. A middle-aged white woman at the next kiosk seemed surprised by Jasmine's efficiency, her eyebrows rising as Jasmine completed the process in half the time it took her. "First time flying?" the woman asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No, ma'am," Jasmine replied politely. "I've been flying since I was a toddler." The woman seemed taken aback but offered a tight smile before turning away. Jasmine took a deep breath, reminding herself of her father's advice. "You don't owe explanations to anyone. Your presence is enough." With her suitcase checked and boarding pass in hand, Jasmine headed toward security, sending her father a quick text, "Checked in. Heading to security now. All good." Little did she know that her ordinary travel day was about to become anything but. The security checkpoint at Terminal 1 bustled with morning travelers. Jasmine joined the line, mentally reviewing the procedure she'd followed dozens of times before. Remove shoes, take out electronics, empty pockets, walk through the scanner, collect belongings. Simple, routine, ordinary. But sometimes, for people who looked like Jasmine, even the most ordinary procedures could become extraordinary obstacles. As the line inched forward, Jasmine observed how the TSA agents interacted with different passengers. The middle-aged white businessman ahead of her received cursory questions and a polite nod. The elderly white couple after him got assistance and smiles. When Jasmine's turn came, the agent's demeanor shifted subtly. "Destination?" the male TSA agent asked, his voice sharper than it had been moments before. "Atlanta," Jasmine answered clearly, sliding her boarding pass and ID across the counter. The agent studied her identification with unusual scrutiny, looking between the photo and her face multiple times. "Purpose of travel?" He continued, a question he hadn't asked previous passengers. Visiting family, Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure despite the growing discomfort. Traveling alone? The agent's eyebrows raised slightly. Yes, sir. After what felt like an unnecessarily long examination, the agent marked her boarding pass and directed her toward the screening area. Jasmine placed her backpack, shoes, and hoodie in the plastic bin, keeping her expression neutral despite the anxiety building in her chest. As she waited to walk through the body scanner, Jasmine noticed a TSA agent whispering to another while glancing in her direction. When her turn came to enter the scanner, she followed all protocols perfectly, arms raised, feet on the marked positions, staying still until instructed to exit. Step aside, please, a female TSA agent said as Jasmine emerged. Is something wrong? Jasmine asked, keeping her voice level. Random additional screening, the agent replied, though her eyes didn't meet Jasmine's. Jasmine looked around, noticing that the white teenage girl who had gone through just before her was already collecting her belongings. No random screening for her. Arms out, please, the female agent instructed, beginning a pat-down that felt more thorough than necessary. Jasmine complied silently, remembering the conversations her parents had with her about these situations. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, it's not fair, but it's reality. Stay calm, follow instructions, and remember your rights. After the pat-down, the agent swabbed Jasmine's hands for residue testing while another agent performed a detailed search of her backpack. They removed her aviation magazine, flipping through it page by page. They examined her notebook, reading her handwritten notes about aircraft specifications. They even inspected the frame backing of her family photo. Throughout the ordeal, Jasmine remained outwardly calm, though her heart raced. Around her, other travelers, mostly white, moved through security with relative ease, some casting curious or uncomfortable glances her way. Finally, after nearly 15 minutes of additional screening, Jasmine was allowed to repack her belongings and continue to her gate. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied her shoes and zipped her backpack, but she refused to let the emotion show on her face. Once clear of security, Jasmine ducked into a quiet corner near a water fountain, taking a moment to collect herself. She pulled out her phone and texted her father, through security. Heading to gate A23 now. She considered mentioning the extra screening but decided against it. Her father had enough on his mind with his meeting, and besides, this wasn't anything new. Just another day of traveling while black. Checking the time, 7:15 a.m. for her 8:30 a.m. flight, Jasmine made her way to gate A23. The boarding area was already filling with passengers, though boarding wouldn't begin for at least another half hour. Jasmine found an empty seat near the large windows overlooking the tarmac, giving her a perfect view of the aircraft operations below. She watched with genuine interest as ground crews prepared various aircraft, mentally identifying each model and airline. When she spotted her own flight's A320 being towed into position, she couldn't resist taking a few photos with her phone, a habit she developed for her digital aviation journal. At the gate counter, flight attendant Melissa Bailey noticed the teenage girl photographing the aircraft and frowned. In her 15 years with SkyWest, Melissa had developed what she considered a sixth sense for security concerns. A young person traveling alone, taking photos of aircraft, setting off alarms in her mind. Harold, she said quietly to the gate agent, Harold Peters, have you noticed that girl in the blue hoodie? Harold glanced up from his computer. What about her? She's been watching the tarmac operations and taking pictures of the plane, Melissa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And she's alone. Harold studied Jasmine for a moment. Probably just a kid excited about flying. Maybe, Melissa conceded, unconvinced. But in today's world, we can't be too careful. I'm going to keep an eye on her. As the gate area filled with more passengers, Jasmine remained absorbed in her aviation magazine, occasionally glancing up to check the boarding screens or watch a particular ground operation that caught her interest. She didn't notice Melissa's frequent glances in her direction, nor Harold's growing attention. When Jasmine stood to take another photo of a particularly interesting ground procedure, refueling alongside baggage loading, Melissa nudged Harold again. "See? More photos. And look how she's studying the security procedures and timing everything." In reality, Jasmine was simply documenting an efficient ground operation for her journal, impressed by the coordination of the ramp workers. But through Melissa's biased lens, ordinary enthusiasm transformed into suspicious behavior. "Should we alert security?" Harold asked, now fully invested in Melissa's concerns. Melissa considered this. "Not yet. Let me talk to her first. See if she gives any reason for concern." As Melissa stepped out from behind the counter, Jasmine had returned to her seat, checking the time on her phone before sending another text to her father, at gate A23. "Watching our A320 get prepared. N753 SW, manufactured in 2018 if I remember correctly. Can't wait to see if the interior has the new lighting system." Unbeknownst to Jasmine, her knowledge of aircraft details and attention to operational procedures, the very passion she shared with her father, was about to be weaponized against her. First-class passengers and those needing special assistance may now begin boarding for SkyWest Airlines Flight 1382 to Atlanta, Harold announced over the PA system, his voice carrying across the gate area. Jasmine remained seated, her boarding pass indicating she was in Group 3. She watched as first-class passengers formed a line, mentally noting how many would be seated in the premium cabin. Her attention to these details wasn't unusual for an aviation enthusiast. But through Melissa Bailey's eyes, every observation became suspicious. Melissa approached Jasmine, her customer service smile firmly in place but not quite reaching her eyes. "Excuse me, miss," Melissa said, standing directly in front of Jasmine. "May I see your boarding pass?" Jasmine looked up, slightly surprised by the direct approach before general boarding had begun, but she reached for her boarding pass without hesitation. "Here you go," she said, handing over the document. Melissa examined it with exaggerated thoroughness. "Jasmine Washington," she read aloud. "You're traveling to Atlanta today, alone?" The question came with a raised eyebrow that immediately put Jasmine on alert. "Yes, I'm visiting my grandmother," Jasmine replied politely. "I see. And you're how old?" Melissa continued, her tone suggesting disbelief. 16, Jasmine answered. "I have my ID if you need to verify." "That would be helpful, actually," Melissa said, extending her hand. Jasmine reached into her backpack and produced her state ID card, which she handed to Melissa. The flight attendant studied it with the same excessive scrutiny the TSA agent had shown earlier. "So, Jasmine," Melissa continued, handing back the ID but keeping the boarding pass, "what brings you to the airport so early? Your boarding group won't be called for at least 20 minutes. "I just like to be on time," Jasmine replied, discomfort growing as she noticed other passengers beginning to glance their way. "My dad always says it's better to be early than rushed." "Your dad," Melissa repeated. "And where is he today?" "He's at a meeting in another terminal," Jasmine explained, feeling increasingly like she was being interrogated. "He works at the airport." "What exactly does your father do here?" Melissa pressed. Jasmine hesitated. Her father had always taught her humility, to never lead with his position or use it for special treatment. It felt strange to mention it now, as though she was name-dropping to get out of trouble she shouldn't be in to begin with. "He works for the airline," Jasmine said simply. Melissa's expression hardened slightly at what she perceived as evasiveness. "I've noticed you taking a lot of pictures of our aircraft and watching the ground operations very carefully. May I ask why?" The question caught Jasmine off guard. "I'm interested in aviation," she explained. "I keep a journal about different aircraft and operations. I want to be an aerospace engineer someday." "An aerospace engineer," Melissa repeated, her tone making it clear she didn't believe Jasmine. "And that requires photographing security procedures?" "I wasn't photographing security procedures," Jasmine said, her voice still calm though her heart rate had accelerated. "I was just documenting the ground operations. It's a hobby." By now, several nearby passengers were openly watching the interaction. An older white man with a laptop had paused his typing to observe. A middle-aged white woman with 2 children whispered something to her husband, casting suspicious glances at Jasmine. "Would you mind if I take a look at your backpack?" Melissa asked, though her tone suggested it wasn't really a request. Jasmine felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She was being treated like a criminal in full view of dozens of passengers, and she hadn't done anything wrong. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" she asked, trying to redirect the conversation. "We just need to ensure everyone's safety," Melissa replied, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It's standard procedure when we observe concerning behavior." Jasmine wanted to point out that it absolutely was not standard procedure to search passengers' belongings at the gate after they'd already cleared security, but she also knew escalating the situation might make things worse. "Fine," she said quietly, unzipping her backpack and placing it on the empty seat beside her. Melissa began rifling through Jasmine's belongings without gloves or care for her privacy. She pulled out Jasmine's aviation magazine, flipping through it with a frown. Next came Jasmine's notebook, which Melissa opened and began reading aloud. A320 maximum takeoff weight, 77,000 kilograms. Typical cruise speed, 447 knots. "Why do you have all this information?" Melissa demanded. "Like I said, I'm interested in aviation," Jasmine repeated, mortification burning her cheeks as more passengers turned to stare. When Melissa discovered Jasmine's collection of photos, all innocent snapshots of aircraft she traveled on or observed, her suspicion visibly deepened. "You have quite a collection of aircraft photos here," Melissa said, her tone implying something sinister. Jasmine reached for her phone. "I'm going to call my dad now." "I'm afraid I can't allow phone use during a security check," Melissa said quickly, placing her hand over Jasmine's to stop her. "It's protocol." "What protocol?" Jasmine challenged, finally finding her voice. "I've already been through security. You're a flight attendant, not TSA or police." "I have every right to call my father." Melissa's expression hardened. "If you're going to be uncooperative, I'll have no choice but to involve airport security." From across the gate area, an older white woman with silver hair and a floral blouse stood up. Beatrice Thompson, a retired high school principal, had been watching the interaction with growing concern. "Excuse me," Beatrice called out, approaching Jasmine and Melissa. "Is everything all right here? This young lady seems to be cooperating fully." Melissa turned to Beatrice with a tight smile. "Ma'am, this is an airline security matter. I appreciate your concern, but we have protocols to follow." "What protocol involves publicly humiliating a child who's already gone through security screening?" Beatrice pressed. "I've been watching, and I haven't seen anything concerning about her behavior." "With all due respect," Melissa replied, her voice hardening, "you don't know what to look for. We're trained to identify suspicious activities." "I know what discrimination looks like," Beatrice countered firmly. "I saw you watching her from the moment she sat down." Other passengers began murmuring, some nodding in agreement with Beatrice, others shifting uncomfortably or turning away. Melissa's face flushed. "Sir," she called to Harold at the gate desk, "please call security to gate A23. Jasmine felt her stomach drop. This was escalating beyond her control, and despite having done nothing wrong, she was now facing security intervention for the second time that morning. "Please," Jasmine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just let me call my father. He can clear this up." "You can call whoever you want after security has assessed the situation," Melissa stated firmly, gathering Jasmine's belongings and holding them out of reach. Harold's voice came over the phone at the gate desk. Security is on their way. Jasmine sat frozen, humiliation and fear washing over her in equal measure. Around her, the boarding process continued for other passengers, many of whom now avoided eye contact or openly stared at the unfolding drama. And somewhere in another terminal, completely unaware of his daughter's ordeal, Terrence Washington was concluding his meeting, preparing to check on Jasmine before her flight. Within minutes, 2 airport security officers arrived at gate A23. The first, a tall black man with a closely cropped beard who introduced himself as Officer James Wilson, approached with a professional demeanor. The second, a shorter white man with a crew cut who didn't offer his name but whose badge read Officer Frank Cooper, flanked him with his hand resting near his taser. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Wilson asked, looking between Melissa and Jasmine. Melissa stepped forward eagerly. "This young woman has been exhibiting suspicious behavior, photographing security procedures, documenting aircraft operations, and carrying technical information about our planes. When questioned, she became evasive about her purpose here." Officer Wilson turned to Jasmine, his expression neutral but not unkind. "Miss, can you tell me your name and what you're doing at the airport today?" "My name is Jasmine Washington," she replied, her voice smaller than she would have liked. "I'm 16 years old, and I'm traveling to Atlanta to visit my grandmother. I have a confirmed ticket on this flight, and I've already been through security screening." "She claims her father works for the airline," Melissa interjected. "But she won't say in what capacity." "May I see your ID and boarding pass, please?" Officer Wilson asked Jasmine. Jasmine looked pointedly at Melissa. "She has my boarding pass." Melissa reluctantly handed it over, along with Jasmine's ID, which Officer Wilson examined and returned to Jasmine. "Everything appears to be in order with her documentation," he noted. "It's not about her documentation," Melissa insisted. "It's about her behavior. Look at her notebook, full of technical specifications about our aircraft. And she's been taking photos of security-sensitive areas." Officer Cooper, who had been silent until now, stepped closer. "Let me see that notebook." Without waiting for permission, he took Jasmine's notebook from Melissa and began flipping through it with a scowl. Around them, the gate area had become a theater of uncomfortable spectators. Some passengers pretended to be absorbed in their phones or books, while others openly watched the drama unfold. A few had their phones out, recording the interaction. "What's all this?" Officer Cooper demanded, pointing to a page with diagrams of aircraft emergency exits. "Looks like you're studying how to breach aircraft security systems." "Those are safety diagrams," Jasmine explained, frustration finally creeping into her voice. "Every passenger is supposed to know where the emergency exits are. It's in the safety briefing." "Don't get smart with me, young lady," Officer Cooper warned. Beatrice Thompson, who had remained nearby, stepped forward again. "Officers, I've been sitting here the entire time, and this young woman has done nothing suspicious. She was quietly reading and occasionally looking at the planes, like dozens of other passengers do every day." Officer Cooper turned to Beatrice with a dismissive wave. "Ma'am, please step back and let us do our job. Your job is to ensure safety, not harass innocent travelers," Beatrice replied firmly, standing her ground. "I was an educator for 40 years, and I know intimidation when I see it." "Ma'am, if you continue to interfere with a security matter, we'll have to ask you to leave the area," Officer Cooper threatened. Officer Wilson, seeming uncomfortable with how the situation was escalating, attempted to de-escalate. "Miss Washington, can you explain why you were taking photos of the aircraft?" "I'm interested in aviation," Jasmine explained for what felt like the dozenth time. "My father works in the industry, and I want to be an aerospace engineer. I keep a journal of different aircraft I see and their operations. There's nothing illegal about photographing planes from a public area." "And who exactly is your father?" Officer Wilson asked. Before Jasmine could answer, Melissa cut in. "She refuses to say. Probably making it up. I'm not making anything up, Jasmine said, her patience finally wearing thin. My father is Terrence Washington. He's the CEO of SkyWest Airlines. I didn't mention it before because he taught me never to use his position for special treatment. But right now, I'd really like to call him. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Officer Wilson's face, but Officer Cooper scoffed audibly. Right, and my father is the president, he said sarcastically. If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. I'm not lying, Jasmine insisted, tears of frustration finally welling in her eyes. Please, just let me call him. He's in a meeting in Terminal 2. He was planning to check on me before boarding anyway. We're going to need you to come with us to the security office, Officer Cooper stated firmly. We'll sort this out there. Am I being detained? Jasmine asked, remembering her father's lessons about rights. Because if I'm not under arrest, I don't have to go anywhere with you. Officer Cooper's face hardened. You're considered a flight risk at this point. Either you come voluntarily for questioning, or you'll be removed from the flight manifest and escorted from the secured area. Jasmine felt trapped. If she refused to go, she'd miss her flight and be stuck at the airport alone. If she went with them, there was no telling how long they'd hold her or what they might accuse her of next. Can I at least call my father first? She asked again. You can call whoever you want after we've completed our initial assessment, Officer Cooper stated. Jasmine looked to Officer Wilson, hoping for some support, but he merely gave her an apologetic look that suggested she should comply for now. With her heart pounding and cheeks burning with humiliation, Jasmine stood, gathering her backpack that Melissa had thoroughly disorganized. This is wrong, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. As Jasmine prepared to follow the officers, Beatrice Thompson pulled out her phone. Young lady, what's your father's name again? I'm going to see if I can reach him. Terrence Washington, Jasmine repeated. He's the CEO of SkyWest, yes, Beatrice nodded. I heard you. I'll see what I can do. Officer Cooper turned to Beatrice with a warning glare. Ma'am, interfering with a security investigation is a federal offense. So is civil rights violation, Beatrice shot back, undeterred. I'm simply making a phone call, which is perfectly legal in this public space. Have you ever witnessed someone being unfairly targeted because of their race? Type number 1 in the comments if you think what's happening to Jasmine is racial profiling. Hit that like button if you'd stand up like Beatrice did in this situation, and subscribe to see how this outrageous confrontation unfolds. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you remain calm like she has, or would you respond differently? And what do you think will happen when Terrence Washington discovers how his daughter is being treated? Stay with us as the tension builds in our next segment. The walk from Gate A23 to the airport security office felt like a march of shame for Jasmine. With Officer Cooper leading the way and Officer Wilson flanking her side, she moved through the terminal with her head bowed, acutely aware of the curious and judgmental stares from travelers they passed. Can we please not do this so publicly? Jasmine asked quietly to Officer Wilson, who seemed marginally more reasonable than his partner. Just keep walking, he replied, though his tone carried a hint of sympathy. The sooner we get to the office, the sooner we can sort this out. The security office was located in a less trafficked area of the terminal, down a corridor past a set of restrooms. Officer Cooper opened the door with his keycard, revealing a stark space with fluorescent lighting, a metal desk, 3 chairs, and a wall of monitors displaying various areas of the airport. Sit, Officer Cooper instructed, pointing to a metal chair opposite the desk. Jasmine complied, placing her backpack on the floor beside her. The room felt cold and intimidating, intentionally so, she suspected. Now, Officer Cooper began, taking a seat behind the desk while Officer Wilson remained standing near the door. Let's start with your full name and date of birth. Jasmine Diana Washington, she replied. Born May 12, 2009. Officer Cooper wrote this information on a form. Purpose of your travel today? I told you already. I'm visiting my grandmother in Atlanta. And you're traveling alone? Yes. Don't you think that's a bit unusual? A 16-year-old traveling cross-country by herself? Jasmine took a deep breath. No, I don't. Thousands of minors travel unaccompanied every day. I'm not even registered as an unaccompanied minor because I'm over 14. Officer Cooper narrowed his eyes at her knowledgeable response. You seem to know a lot about airline policies. My father works for the airline, Jasmine repeated. I've grown up around aviation my whole life. Yes, your supposed father, the CEO, Officer Cooper said with obvious disbelief. What's his full name again? Terrence James Washington. And your mother's name? Diana Lawrence Washington. She's currently in Europe on business. Officer Cooper continued taking notes. So convenient that both your parents are unavailable to verify your story. My father isn't unavailable, Jasmine insisted. He's literally in this airport right now. If you would just let me call him, we'll get to that, Officer Cooper cut her off. First, I want to know why you were documenting our security procedures. I wasn't, Jasmine said, frustration mounting. I was taking photos of the aircraft because I'm interested in aviation. There's no law against that. Actually, Officer Cooper countered, photographing certain areas of airport operations can be considered a security breach under TSA regulations. That's not true, Jasmine replied, surprising both officers with her confidence. TSA photography rules state that passengers are allowed to photograph aircraft, terminals, and operations from publicly accessible areas. The only prohibited photography involves security screening checkpoints, which I wasn't anywhere near. Officer Wilson raised an eyebrow, impressed by her knowledge but saying nothing. Officer Cooper's face hardened. Let me see your phone. Do you have a warrant? Jasmine asked, remembering another of her father's lessons about rights. This isn't a criminal investigation, yet, Officer Cooper replied. But if you want to make it one by obstructing a security assessment, we can certainly escalate matters. Reluctantly, Jasmine handed over her unlocked phone. Officer Cooper began scrolling through her photo gallery, which indeed contained dozens of images of aircraft, airport operations, and aviation events she'd attended with her father. What's your real purpose for flying to Atlanta? Officer Cooper asked suddenly, looking up from the phone. I told you, to visit my grandmother. And you expect us to believe that a teenager with detailed knowledge of aircraft specifications, airport layouts, and security regulations is just going on a family visit? The implication behind his words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Are you suggesting I'm some kind of terrorist? Officer Wilson shifted uncomfortably by the door but remained silent. I'm not suggesting anything, Officer Cooper replied coldly. I'm asking questions based on suspicious behavior reported by trained airline staff. Jasmine fought back tears of frustration. Being black and knowledgeable about aviation isn't suspicious behavior. It's racial profiling. Playing the race card isn't going to help your situation, Officer Cooper warned. It's not a card, it's my life, Jasmine replied, her voice cracking slightly. This wouldn't be happening if I were white. At this point, Officer Wilson finally spoke up. Cooper, maybe we should let her make that phone call. If her story checks out, we can resolve this quickly. Protocol is to complete the initial assessment first, Cooper insisted. What protocol? Jasmine challenged. I know my rights. I have the right to make a phone call if I'm being detained. You're not officially detained, Cooper clarified with a smirk. You're voluntarily assisting with a security inquiry. This doesn't feel voluntary, Jasmine pointed out. Before Cooper could respond, there was a knock at the door. Officer Wilson opened it to reveal Melissa Bailey, the flight attendant who had initiated this entire ordeal. I thought you might need my incident report, Melissa said, holding up a form. And I can answer any questions about the suspicious behavior I observed. Perfect timing, Officer Cooper said, gesturing for her to enter. We were just getting to that. Jasmine felt her heart sink as Melissa took a seat next to Officer Cooper, both of them now facing her across the desk like prosecutors in a trial where she had no defense attorney. Miss Bailey, Cooper began, could you please describe the concerning behaviors you observed? Melissa straightened in her chair, clearly relishing her moment of authority. I first noticed the subject, her name is Jasmine, Officer Wilson interrupted quietly. Melissa cleared her throat. I first noticed Jasmine when she arrived at the gate approximately 75 minutes before departure, unusually early for a domestic flight. That's suspicious. Jasmine couldn't help interjecting. Being on time. Please don't interrupt, Cooper warned. Melissa continued, she positioned herself by the window with a direct view of the aircraft and tarmac operations. Over the next 30 minutes, I observed her taking multiple photographs of the plane, ground crew movements, and security personnel positions. I was photographing the aircraft, not security personnel, Jasmine objected. Melissa ignored her. She was timing various operations, making notes, and appeared to be documenting gate procedures and staff rotations. That's completely false, Jasmine said, her voice rising in disbelief. I was reading my magazine and occasionally looking out the window. Additionally, Melissa continued as if Jasmine hadn't spoken, when questioned about her presence and purpose, she became evasive and uncooperative. I answered every question honestly, Jasmine protested. And she made an implausible claim about being related to the Airline CEO, which seemed like an obvious attempt to avoid scrutiny, Melissa finished. Officer Cooper nodded, jotting notes. And based on your 15 years of experience, would you say her behavior was consistent with what you've been trained to identify as security threats? Absolutely, Melissa confirmed without hesitation. It matched several red flags in our security awareness training. Officer Wilson, who had been quiet through most of this exchange, finally spoke up. Has anyone actually tried to verify her identity claim? A simple phone call could clear this up. That's what I've been asking for this entire time, Jasmine said, latching onto this small show of rationality. Officer Cooper sighed dramatically. Fine. What's your father's contact number? Jasmine recited Terrence's cell phone number, which Cooper dialed on the office phone, putting it on speaker. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail, you've reached Terrence Washington. I'm unavailable to take your call. Please leave a message or contact my assistant at. Cooper ended the call before the message finished. Convenient. He's in a meeting, Jasmine explained, deflating. He mentioned he might have to turn his phone off. Of course, Cooper said sarcastically. Well, until we can verify your identity and purpose, we'll need to continue our assessment. Jasmine felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. Her flight would be boarding soon, and she was trapped in this room with people who seemed determined to see her as a threat regardless of what she said. Can I try my grandmother in Atlanta? She asked desperately. She's expecting me. That won't be necessary, Cooper replied dismissively. Now, let's go through the contents of your backpack in detail. As Cooper began emptying her backpack item by item onto the desk, Jasmine caught Officer Wilson checking his watch with a concerned expression. Her flight would be departing in less than 40 minutes, and she was increasingly certain she wouldn't be on it. Outside the security office, in the main terminal, Terrence Washington was finishing his call with the board members and heading toward Gate A23, completely unaware of his daughter's ordeal. Terrence Washington ended the conference call with a decisive tap on his phone screen. The meeting had gone exceptionally well, new investors were on board, and the expansion plans for SkyWest's international routes had received unanimous approval. Under different circumstances, he would have been elated, but right now, his thoughts were focused entirely on his daughter. Glancing at his watch, 8:05 a.m., Terrence realized he had just enough time to check on Jasmine before her 8:30 a.m. departure. He navigated through Terminal 2's bustling corridors with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew the airport like the back of his hand. Despite being CEO, Terrence was dressed casually today in a navy polo shirt and khaki pants, his usual attire for days without formal meetings. His SkyWest ID badge was tucked into his pocket rather than displayed prominently. He preferred it this way, able to observe operations without the formality that often accompanied his position. As he approached the tram that would take him to Terminal 1, Terrence checked his phone. The last text from Jasmine had come through at 7:20 a.m., at Gate A23. Watching our A320 get prepared. N753 SW, manufactured in 2018 if I remember correctly. Can't wait to see if the interior has the new lighting system. He smiled at her enthusiasm, making a mental note to check whether N753 SW did indeed have the updated LED lighting she was curious about. Terrence had encouraged Jasmine's aviation passion from an early age, recognizing in her the same fascination that had driven his own career. Boarding the tram, Terrence sent a quick reply, "On my way to your gate now. Should be there in about 10 minutes. When no immediate response came, he assumed Jasmine was either engrossed in her magazine or perhaps already boarding. The flight should be starting its boarding process right about now. Exiting the tram at Terminal 1, Terrence made his way toward Concourse A. As he walked, several employees recognized him despite his casual attire, offering respectful nods or quick greetings of, "Morning, Mr. Washington." He returned each acknowledgement warmly. Maintaining good relationships with frontline staff had been a cornerstone of his leadership philosophy. Approaching Gate A23, Terrence immediately sensed something was off. The boarding process was underway, but the atmosphere seemed tense. Passengers in line were whispering to each other, and several were looking at their phones, seemingly recording or reviewing something. Terrence scanned the gate area for Jasmine but didn't see her among the waiting passengers. Perhaps she was already on board. But that didn't make sense, her boarding group wouldn't have been called yet. At the gate desk, Harold Peters was processing boarding passes with an agitated efficiency, barely making eye contact with passengers. Terrence approached the counter, but without his ID badge visible, Harold didn't recognize him. "Excuse me," Terrence said, "I'm looking for a passenger, Jasmine Washington." Harold barely glanced up. "I can't disclose passenger information, sir. If you're not boarding this flight, I'll need to ask you to step aside." Terrence was about to identify himself when he overheard a conversation from the passengers in line behind him. "Did you see what happened with that young black girl?" an elderly woman was saying to her companion. "It was absolutely disgraceful how they treated her." "I got it all on video," her companion replied. "The way that flight attendant targeted her for just sitting there reading a magazine. Pure harassment." Terrence froze, his paternal instincts immediately on high alert. "Excuse me," he said, turning to the women. "Are you talking about a teenage girl in a navy hoodie?" The first woman, Beatrice Thompson, looked at him appraisingly. "Yes, a lovely young lady named Jasmine. She was detained by security about 20 minutes ago for absolutely nothing. I tried to intervene, but they wouldn't listen." "Detained?" Terrence repeated, his voice dropping dangerously low. "On what grounds?" "Some nonsense about suspicious behavior," Beatrice replied indignantly. "She was just sitting there reading an aviation magazine and taking a few photos of the planes. That flight attendant," she pointed toward the jet bridge where Melissa was checking boarding passes, "decided she was some kind of security threat and called the police on her. The poor girl kept trying to call her father," Beatrice continued. "She said he works for the airline, claimed he was the CEO, actually, though I don't know if that part was true. The security officers wouldn't let her make the call." Terrence's expression darkened. "It's true," he said quietly. "I'm Terrence Washington, CEO of SkyWest. And Jasmine is my daughter." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness," she gasped. "Then you need to see this." She held out her phone, which displayed a video she had recorded of the confrontation. Terrence watched in growing horror as the scene unfolded on the small screen. Melissa questioning Jasmine, searching through her backpack, the security officers arriving, Jasmine being escorted away while trying to maintain her dignity despite the public humiliation. A cold fury settled over Terrence as he watched his daughter, his proud, brilliant daughter, being treated like a criminal for nothing more than being black in an airport. Every fiber of his being wanted to storm down the jet bridge and confront Melissa immediately, but years of navigating corporate America as a black executive had taught him to channel his anger strategically. "Where did they take her?" he asked Beatrice, his voice controlled but vibrating with intensity. "The security office down by gate A15, Beatrice replied. "I tried to follow, but they wouldn't let me. I've been waiting here hoping she'd return before the flight." "Thank you," Terrence said sincerely. "May I have a copy of that video?" "Of course," Beatrice nodded, quickly sending it to the email address he provided. Terrence turned back to the gate desk, this time pulling out his ID badge and placing it firmly on the counter. "Harold," he said, reading the gate agent's name tag, "I'm Terrence Washington, CEO of SkyWest Airlines. I understand you and Flight Attendant Bailey had my daughter detained by security. I need a full explanation, immediately." Harold's face drained of color as he registered who was standing before him. "Mr. Washington," he stammered. I mean, Ms. Bailey reported suspicious." "Save it," Terrence cut him off. "Who's the lead flight attendant on this aircraft?" "Sarah Johnson," Harold replied weakly. "Call her out here now," Terrence ordered. "And get me the names of the security officers who took my daughter." As Harold scrambled to comply, Terrence pulled out his phone and made 3 rapid-fire calls. The first was to Thomas Mitchell, SkyWest's chief of security. "Tom, it's Terrence. My daughter Jasmine has been detained by airport security at gate A23 based on a racially motivated complaint from one of our flight attendants. I need you to meet me at the security office by A15 immediately." He listened briefly. "Yes, that Jasmine. My 16-year-old daughter." The second call was to Patricia Reynolds, SkyWest's general counsel. "Patricia, we have a situation. One of our flight attendants racially profiled my daughter and had her detained by airport security. I need you to meet me at the Terminal 1 security office as soon as possible. And yes, I'm pursuing this with the full weight of both company policy and the law." The third call was to Michael Chen, SkyWest's chief human resources officer. "Michael, I need you to pull the personnel file for a flight attendant named Melissa Bailey immediately. She's currently working Flight 1382 to Atlanta. And I want every complaint ever filed against her on my desk by the end of the day." As he ended the third call, lead flight attendant Sarah Johnson emerged from the jet bridge, confusion evident on her face. "Mr. Washington," she said, clearly surprised to see the CEO at her gate. "Is everything all right?" "No, Sarah, everything is not all right," Terrence replied grimly. "Flight attendant Bailey has just racially profiled and had my daughter detained by security for reading an aviation magazine at the gate. I need you to find an immediate replacement for her on this flight. She is not getting anywhere near that aircraft today." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Of course, sir. I'll handle it right away. And Sarah," Terrence added, his voice softening slightly, "please make an announcement that the flight will be delayed by 15 minutes. I don't want any passengers blaming my daughter for missing their connections." As Sarah hurried back to the aircraft, Terrence turned to Beatrice. "Thank you again for trying to help Jasmine. Not many people would have stood up like you did." "It was the right thing to do," Beatrice replied simply. "Will you let us know when she's okay?" "I will," Terrence promised before setting off toward the security office, his stride purposeful and determined. As he walked, Terrence's mind raced through the implications of what had happened. This wasn't just about Jasmine, though that was more than enough to fuel his righteous anger. This was about a systemic problem that persisted even within his own airline, despite all his efforts to create an inclusive culture. Every black parent in America had the talk with their children about how to behave in public spaces, how to interact with authority figures, how to be twice as good and half as threatening. Terrence and Diana had prepared Jasmine for these realities, but it gutted him that all their preparation still hadn't protected her. Approaching the security office, Terrence saw Thomas Mitchell, his chief of security, already waiting outside. A former FBI agent with 30 years of experience, Thomas had been one of Terrence's first executive hires when he became CEO. "Terrence," Thomas greeted him grimly. "I've confirmed your daughter is inside with Officers Wilson and Cooper. Wilson is solid, but Cooper has had issues before." "What kind of issues?" Terrence asked sharply. "Complaints about differential treatment of minority passengers," Thomas replied. "Nothing that stuck legally, but enough of a pattern that I've had my eye on him." "Well, today it's going to stick," Terrence said firmly. "Are you ready?" Thomas nodded, and together they approached the security office door. Inside the sterile security office, Officer Cooper continued his methodical emptying of Jasmine's backpack, examining each item with exaggerated scrutiny while Melissa Bailey looked on with poorly disguised satisfaction. "Your notebook contains a lot of information about aircraft vulnerabilities," Cooper remarked, flipping through pages of Jasmine's neat handwriting. "Those are emergency evacuation procedures that every passenger should know," Jasmine corrected him, fatigue evident in her voice after nearly 30 minutes of circular questioning. "It's literally the information in the safety card in every seat pocket." Officer Wilson, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the interrogation, checked his watch again. "Cooper, the flight is boarding. We need to make a decision here." "I've made my decision," Cooper replied coldly. "She's not getting on that plane today." Too many unanswered questions. Jasmine felt a wave of despair wash over her. Missing her flight meant disappointing her grandmother, who was already waiting at the Atlanta airport to pick her up. It meant her first attempt at independence had failed spectacularly. And it meant calling her father to explain what had happened, though at this point, that was all she wanted to do. "Can I please call my father now?" she asked, not expecting a different answer than the previous times. Before Cooper could deliver another refusal, a sharp knock on the door interrupted the tension in the room. Officer Wilson moved to answer it, opening the door just enough to see who was outside. "Can I help you?" Wilson asked. "I'm Terrence Washington, CEO of SkyWest Airlines," came a familiar voice that made Jasmine's heart leap. "And I'm here for my daughter." Officer Wilson's eyes widened slightly as he glanced back at Jasmine, whose expression had transformed from despair to vindication. He opened the door fully, revealing Terrence Washington standing there with Thomas Mitchell beside him. Terrence's eyes immediately found Jasmine, assessing her condition with the intense concern of a parent. Seeing her physically unharmed but emotionally distressed, his jaw tightened momentarily before his focus shifted to the others in the room. "Dad!" Jasmine exclaimed, rising from her chair. Officer Cooper stood up abruptly. "Sir, this is a secure area. You can't just—" "I believe Mr. Mitchell has the proper clearance," Terrence interrupted, nodding toward Thomas, who displayed his security credentials. "And as for my presence here, I'm responding to the unlawful detention of my minor daughter." Cooper's expression shifted from authoritative to uncertain as he processed what was happening. "Your daughter?" "Yes, Officer Cooper," Terrence confirmed, reading the name badge. "Jasmine Washington. My daughter. The one you've been detaining for approximately 30 minutes without allowing her to contact her parent, in violation of both airport security protocols and basic civil rights." Melissa Bailey, who had been smugly observing the interrogation, suddenly recognized Terrence from company events. The color drained from her face as the reality of her situation dawned on her. She had racially profiled and falsely reported the CEO's daughter. "Mr. Washington," she stammered, rising awkwardly from her seat. "There's been a misunderstanding, Ms. Bailey," Terrence cut her off, his voice dangerously calm. "I suggest you not speak further without union representation present. We'll address your conduct through the appropriate channels." Turning back to the security officers, Terrence continued, "I want to be perfectly clear about what has happened here. My 16-year-old daughter, who was sitting quietly at her gate reading an aviation magazine while waiting for her flight, was targeted, publicly humiliated, and detained based solely on racial profiling. Sir, we were responding to a credible security concern reported by airline staff. Cooper attempted to defend himself. And what exactly was this credible security concern? Terrence demanded. Before Cooper could respond, Thomas Mitchell stepped forward. As the chief of security for SkyWest Airlines, I'd like to see the official security report detailing these concerns. Cooper hesitated, looking down at the form on his desk that contained little more than Jasmine's basic information and vague notes about suspicious behavior. Officer Wilson, seizing the moment to distance himself from what he now recognized as a problematic detention, spoke up. Sir, I believe there may have been some miscommunication about the nature of the security concerns. Ms. Washington has been cooperative throughout this process. Miscommunication? Terrence repeated, his voice rising slightly. My daughter was publicly accused of being a security threat, had her belongings searched after already clearing TSA, was denied her right to contact her parent, and was interrogated in isolation. All for reading a magazine and taking photos of aircraft, which is perfectly legal in public areas of the airport. Jasmine, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. Dad, they wouldn't believe me when I told them who you were. They thought I was making it up. Terrence's expression softened momentarily as he looked at his daughter. I know, sweetheart. I've seen the video. Video? Cooper asked sharply. Yes, Officer Cooper, Terrence confirmed. Multiple passengers recorded Ms. Bailey's harassment of my daughter at the gate. Those recordings have already been forwarded to SkyWest's legal department and will be presented to the Airport Authority and TSA Oversight Committee. Thomas Mitchell took control of the situation with practiced efficiency. Officer Wilson, Officer Cooper, I'll need copies of all documents related to this incident, including the initial report from Ms. Bailey and any notes from your questioning. Additionally, I'm requesting the security camera footage from this office for the past hour. Cooper's face had gone from uncertain to alarmed. That's not standard protocol for a routine security check. This ceased being routine the moment you denied a minor her right to contact her parent, Thomas replied firmly. Now, unless you're formally charging Ms. Washington with a crime, which I strongly advise against given the complete lack of evidence, she is free to go with her father. A tense silence filled the room as Cooper seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he pushed Jasmine's backpack across the desk toward her. You're free to go, he muttered. And her personal belongings? Terrence prompted, noting items still scattered across the desk. Wilson quickly gathered Jasmine's magazine, notebook, and phone, returning them to her with an apologetic nod. As Jasmine repacked her backpack, Terrence turned his attention to Melissa Bailey, who had remained frozen in her chair throughout the confrontation. Ms. Bailey, he said, his voice carefully controlled, you've been with SkyWest for 15 years, correct? Why yes, sir, she replied nervously. In those 15 years, did you ever attend any of the company's diversity and inclusion trainings? Or review our anti-discrimination policies? I did, sir, she answered, her voice barely audible. Then you're aware that what you did today violates not only company policy but potentially federal civil rights laws as well? Melissa's eyes darted around the room, seeking an ally but finding none. Sir, I was just following security protocols for suspicious behavior. What specifically was suspicious about my daughter reading a magazine? Terrence asked. She was taking photos of the aircraft and security areas, Melissa insisted, grasping at her last defense. From a public area where photography is explicitly permitted, Terrence countered. And the security areas you're referring to were simply the gate and tarmac operations visible from the terminal windows, areas thousands of passengers photograph daily. Melissa fell silent, having no response. Ms. Bailey, you are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation, Terrence stated. Please surrender your company ID to Mr. Mitchell and collect your personal belongings from the aircraft. You will not be working this or any other flight until this matter is resolved." As the gravity of the situation settled over the room, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Patricia Reynolds, SkyWest's general counsel. The elegant, silver-haired attorney entered with purpose, her calculating gaze taking in the scene before her. "Mr. Washington, I came as quickly as I could," she said. "Is Jasmine all right?" "Physically, yes," Terrence replied. "Emotionally, we'll see." Patricia nodded grimly before addressing the security officers. "Gentlemen, I'm Patricia Reynolds, General Counsel for SkyWest Airlines. I'm here to formally notify you that we will be filing complaints with the Airport Authority, the TSA Office of Civil Rights, and potentially the Department of Justice regarding the treatment of Jasmine Washington today." Cooper's face paled further. "That seems excessive for a routine security check." "There was nothing routine about detaining a minor without parental notification, Officer Cooper," Patricia replied sharply. "Nor about conducting what amounts to an interrogation without proper cause or representation. I suggest you contact your union representative immediately." As the legal implications of their actions became clear, both security officers shifted uncomfortably. Wilson, at least, had the decency to look contrite. "Jasmine," Terrence said softly, turning to his daughter, "are you ready to go?" Jasmine nodded, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. The confidence that had been systematically stripped away during her detention began to return as she stood beside her father. "What about my flight?" she asked. "It's been delayed 15 minutes, Terrence informed her. "You'll still make it to Grandma's today, if you still want to go." Jasmine considered this for a moment before nodding firmly. "I want to go. I'm not going to let this stop me." Pride flashed in Terrence's eyes at his daughter's resilience. "That's my girl." As they prepared to leave, Officer Wilson stepped forward. "Miss Washington," he said, genuine remorse in his voice, "I apologize for what happened here today. It wasn't right." Jasmine looked at him thoughtfully. "Thank you for saying that, Officer Wilson. Not everyone would." With dignity intact, Jasmine walked out of the security office flanked by her father, Thomas Mitchell, and Patricia Reynolds, a formidable entourage that turned heads as they made their way back toward Gate A23. For the first time since this ordeal began, Jasmine felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. The nightmare wasn't over, the emotional impact would linger, and there would be statements to give and perhaps testimony to deliver, but in this moment, walking through the terminal with her head held high, Jasmine Washington reclaimed her power. And Melissa Bailey, trailing behind them under Thomas Mitchell's watchful eye, was beginning to understand the true cost of her prejudice. The return journey to Gate A23 carried a different energy than Jasmine's earlier walk of shame. With her father beside her and two senior executives flanking them, Jasmine moved through the terminal with restored dignity. Passengers who had witnessed her humiliation earlier now watched with curious expressions as she passed, many recognizing Terrence Washington despite his casual attire. At the gate, the scene had transformed. Lead Flight Attendant Sarah Johnson stood at the desk alongside Harold Peters, both looking anxious as they spotted the approaching group. The boarding process had been temporarily paused, with passengers waiting in the gate area, many of them scrolling through phones or whispering about the unfolding drama. Beatrice Thompson, who had alerted Terrence to his daughter's situation, stood up as they approached. "Jasmine, thank goodness," she said warmly. "Are you all right, dear?" "I'm okay, Ms. Thompson," Jasmine replied with a grateful smile. "Thank you for helping my dad find me." Terrence extended his hand to Beatrice. "Ms. Thompson, I can't thank you enough for standing up for my daughter when others wouldn't." "It was nothing more than anyone should have done," Beatrice insisted. "The way she was treated was appalling." Terrence turned to address Sarah and Harold, who both looked increasingly uncomfortable as Melissa Bailey was escorted to the gate by Thomas Mitchell. "Sarah," Terrence began, his voice firm but professional, "I understand you've arranged for a replacement for Ms. Bailey on this flight." "Yes," Sir, Sarah confirmed. Flight attendant Lisa Alvarez will be taking her position. She's preparing the cabin now. Good, Terrence nodded. And Mr. Peters, he continued, turning to Harold, I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding your role in today's events. Harold swallowed visibly. Mr. Washington, I was just following MS Bailey's lead regarding the security concern, which is precisely the problem. Terrence cut him off. As gate agent, you are the primary authority at this gate, not the flight attendant. You failed to exercise independent judgment or to verify the legitimacy of the concerns before escalating to security. Harold had no response to this accurate assessment. Patricia Reynolds stepped forward. Mr. Peters, you'll be contacted by HR regarding a formal review of this incident. In the meantime, please provide a complete written statement of today's events before the end of your shift. As Harold nodded weakly, Terrence addressed both airline employees. Let me be absolutely clear, what happened today represents a catastrophic failure of our company values and training. Racial profiling has no place at SkyWest, and the consequences for those involved will reflect the severity of this breach. By now, several passengers had gathered closer, some openly recording the confrontation on their phones. Terrence was acutely aware of the public nature of this moment but made no effort to move to a more private location. The humiliation his daughter had endured had been public, the accountability would be as well. Jasmine tugged gently at her father's sleeve. Dad, my flight. Terrence checked his watch. You're right. We should get you on board. He turned to Sarah. Please begin the boarding process again. My daughter will board with the first group. Of course, Mr. Washington, Sarah replied, moving quickly to the desk to make the announcement. As passengers began lining up again, Terrence guided Jasmine to a quiet corner near the gate. Are you sure you still want to fly today? He asked gently. I can arrange a private flight later, or drive you to Atlanta myself if you'd prefer. Jasmine shook her head. No, I need to do this. If I don't get on this plane today, it'll be harder tomorrow, and even harder the day after that. She straightened her shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that it made Terrence smile despite the circumstances. Besides, Grandma is waiting. Your mother and I raised a strong woman, Terrence said proudly. Call me when you land, and again when you reach Grandma's house, okay? I will, Jasmine promised. Their moment was interrupted by Patricia Reynolds, who approached with a business card in hand. Jasmine, she said kindly, I know this is a lot to process right now, but when you're ready, tomorrow or the next day, I'd like to get your full statement about what happened. My direct number is on the card. Jasmine accepted the card, tucking it into her pocket. Will there be? I mean, what happens next? With everyone involved? Patricia exchanged a glance with Terrence before answering carefully. There will be a thorough investigation, both internal and potentially external. Your testimony will be an important part of that process, but don't worry about it right now. Just focus on your trip. As Sarah announced priority boarding, Terrence gave Jasmine one final hug. I love you, Jazz. Don't let today dim your light. I love you too, Dad, Jasmine replied, squeezing him tightly. With her head held high, Jasmine joined the boarding line, presenting her pass to Sarah with quiet dignity. As she disappeared down the jet bridge, Terrence felt equal measures of pride in her resilience and anger at the system that had tested it so harshly. Turning back to the gate area, Terrence found Thomas Mitchell waiting with Melissa Bailey, who looked shell-shocked by the rapid unraveling of her career. MS Bailey, Terrence said, his voice now stripped of the protective calm he'd maintained in front of Jasmine, I want to be absolutely clear about something. What you did today wasn't just unprofessional, it was cruel and discriminatory. You targeted my daughter because of the color of her skin, and then you doubled down when given multiple opportunities to correct your mistake. Melissa's eyes welled with tears. Mr. Washington, I didn't mean, save it, Terrence cut her off. You'll have ample opportunity to explain yourself during the formal investigation. For now, Mr. Mitchell will escort you to HR to process your suspension." As Thomas led Melissa away, Terrence turned to Patricia. "I want every complaint ever filed against her, every incident report she's been involved in, and interviews with every crew member she's worked with in the past year." "Already in progress," Patricia assured him. "Michael has a team pulling her complete personnel file as we speak." "But Terrence," she added in a lower voice, "this isn't just about Melissa Bailey." "I know," Terrence acknowledged grimly. "It's systemic. And as CEO, that makes it my responsibility." Patricia nodded. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time for a comprehensive overhaul of our training and protocols," Terrence replied. "And I'm thinking about the thousands of passengers who don't have a CEO father to intervene when they're racially profiled." Before Patricia could respond, Terrence's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael Chen, the HR director. Emergency executive meeting called for 11 a.m. in the main conference room. All VPs and directors confirmed attendance. "Good," Terrence said, showing Patricia the message. "Today is going to be a turning point for SkyWest, one way or another." As the boarding process continued around them, Beatrice Thompson approached once more. "Mr. Washington," she said, "I just wanted to say goodbye before my flight. And to tell you what an impressive young woman your daughter is. The way she handled herself through that ordeal showed remarkable poise." "Thank you, Ms. Thompson," Terrence replied sincerely. "And thank you again for being an ally when she needed one. Too many people would have looked away." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Beatrice observed sagely. "Too many people looking away." As Beatrice joined the boarding line, Terrence's phone buzzed again, this time with a social media alert. Someone had posted a video of Jasmine's confrontation with Melissa, and it was already gaining traction, with comments flooding in about racial profiling at airports. "It's going viral," he told Patricia, showing her the notification. Patricia grimaced. "We need to get ahead of this. Corporate communications should issue a statement immediately." "No," Terrence decided. "I'll make the statement myself. This isn't a situation for corporate speak or vague promises of doing better. This requires direct accountability from the top." By the time Flight 1382 pushed back from the gate with Jasmine safely on board, the video had been shared thousands of times. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack was trending, and news outlets were beginning to pick up the story. As Terrence walked toward the executive offices with Patricia, he received a text from Jasmine. "We're taking off now. I'm okay, Dad. Let's make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Reading his daughter's message, Terrence felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wouldn't be swept under the rug or addressed with a token sensitivity training. What happened to Jasmine would become a catalyst for real change, not just at SkyWest, but throughout the industry. In the emergency executive meeting that followed, Terrence Washington stood before his leadership team not just as their CEO, but as a father whose child had been harmed by the very company he led. The dual perspective gave his words a weight and urgency that commanded the room's complete attention. "What happened today isn't just a PR crisis," he told them. "It's a fundamental failure of our values as a company and as human beings. My daughter was racially profiled, publicly humiliated, and illegally detained, all while wearing the same SkyWest logo that each of us represents." The room fell silent as executives absorbed both the facts of the incident and the emotion behind Terrence's words. "I've always believed that leadership starts at the top," he continued. "So today, I'm not just asking for action, I'm demanding it. Within 24 hours, I want a comprehensive review of every discrimination complaint filed against our staff in the past 5 years. I want our security protocols audited with a focus on racial bias. And I want a complete overhaul of our diversity training programs, which clearly aren't working." Michael Chen, the HR director, spoke up. "We've already begun the investigation into Ms. Bailey's history with the company. Preliminary findings show 3 previous complaints of similar behavior, none of which resulted in disciplinary action. And why is that? Terrence asked sharply. The previous complaints were deemed inconclusive due to lack of corroborating evidence, Michael explained, his discomfort evident. In each case, it was essentially the passenger's word against Ms. Bailey's. Which means we systematically dismissed the experiences of those passengers, Terrence concluded. That stops today. By the time the meeting concluded 3 hours later, concrete action plans had been established across every department. The legal team would review all passenger complaints with a fresh perspective. Operations would revise security escalation protocols. HR would implement mandatory bias training with real consequences for non-compliance. And corporate communications would issue a statement acknowledging the incident and outlining specific steps being taken to address systemic issues. Meanwhile, in the air somewhere over Tennessee, Jasmine Washington sat quietly by the window, watching the landscape pass beneath her. The empty seat beside her, a buffer arranged by the sympathetic lead flight attendant, gave her space to process the morning's events. Lisa Alvarez, the flight attendant who had replaced Melissa, approached with a gentle smile. "Can I get you anything, Ms. Washington?" "Just water, please," Jasmine replied, returning the smile. As Lisa moved away, Jasmine turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her from the plexiglass. In that moment, she made a decision. What had happened to her was wrong, but it wasn't unique. Across the country, people who looked like her faced similar treatment every day, most without the protection of a CEO father or the platform his position provided. Pulling out her phone in airplane mode, Jasmine opened her notes app and began typing. By the time Flight 1382 touched down in Atlanta, she had outlined a social media campaign focused on sharing stories of travel discrimination and advocating for industry-wide change. Her grandmother, waiting at the arrival gate with open arms, immediately noticed the determined gleam in Jasmine's eyes. "Something tells me," the wise older woman said as they embraced, "that you've got more stories to tell me than just airport security." "Grandma," Jasmine replied with newfound purpose, "you have no idea." The incident at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport would prove to be just the beginning of a much larger conversation, one that would eventually transform not just SkyWest Airlines, but the way the entire industry approached issues of racial equity and justice. Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling? If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and share it to spread awareness. Comment below with your thoughts on how we should address racial profiling in public spaces. Subscribe to see more stories of justice prevailing against discrimination. Now, let's see how this powerful story concludes in our final segment. 1 month later, Terrence Washington stood at the podium in SkyWest's largest conference room, facing over 300 employees gathered for an all-company meeting. The room buzzed with anticipation. This was the first time many of them would hear directly from the CEO about the incident that had made national headlines and transformed company policy. "Thank you all for being here today," Terrence began, his voice steady and resolute. 1 month ago, my 16-year-old daughter Jasmine was racially profiled and detained while waiting to board one of our flights. It was a painful reminder that despite our company values and despite my position as CEO, we still have significant work to do in addressing systemic bias within our organization. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on Terrence as he continued. "I could have handled this quietly. I could have made it disappear with a few phone calls and private reprimands. But that would have betrayed not only my daughter but every passenger who has ever experienced discrimination on one of our flights without the benefit of having the CEO as their father." Terrence paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Today, I'm announcing the implementation of the Jasmine Washington Initiative, a comprehensive overhaul of our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This isn't just another training program or policy document. This is a fundamental reimagining of how we operate as an airline and how we treat every passenger who trusts us with their journey." On the large screen behind him, details of the initiative appeared. First, every employee, from baggage handlers to board members, including myself, will undergo enhanced anti-bias training developed in partnership with leading civil rights organizations. This isn't a one-time seminar but an ongoing commitment that will be integrated into our regular professional development. Second, we're implementing a new security escalation protocol that requires multiple levels of verification before involving law enforcement for non-emergency situations. No passenger will ever again be detained based on a single employee's subjective assessment. Third, we're establishing an independent passenger advocacy office with the authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action without interference from management. And finally, we're creating the SkyWest Inclusion Scholarship, which will provide funding for young people of color pursuing careers in aviation. The first recipient of this scholarship will be announced later today. As Terrence outlined each component of the initiative, he could see a mixture of reactions among the employees, some nodding in approval, others shifting uncomfortably, a few looking skeptical. Change was never easy, especially when it required confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself and one's workplace. I know some of you may be thinking that this is an overreaction to a single incident, Terrence acknowledged. But our internal review revealed that what happened to Jasmine wasn't an isolated case. In the past 5 years, we've received over 100 complaints of discriminatory treatment from passengers of color. Most of those complaints were dismissed due to lack of evidence or conflicting accounts. Murmurs rippled through the audience as this information sank in. The truth is, Terrence continued, we've been systematically failing a significant portion of our passengers. And that ends today. At this point, Terrence gestured toward the side of the stage, where Jasmine herself now stood. Dressed in a professional navy blue blazer over a white blouse, she looked poised and confident as she joined her father at the podium. "I'd like to introduce my daughter, Jasmine Washington," Terrence said, pride evident in his voice. In the aftermath of her experience, Jasmine could have retreated in fear or responded with anger. Instead, she chose to transform her ordeal into an opportunity for change. Jasmine stepped up to the microphone, taking a deep breath before addressing the silent audience. "Thank you for having me here today," she began, her voice clear and steady. "What happened to me last month was frightening and humiliating. But as I've spoken with other travelers since then, I've realized just how common these experiences are for people who look like me." She gestured to the screen, which now displayed the social media campaign she had launched. #TravelingWhileBlack had garnered millions of impressions, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of discrimination while traveling. In the past month, over 15,000 people have shared their experiences of being profiled, questioned, searched, or detained while simply trying to reach their destinations, Jasmine explained. These aren't isolated incidents. They're evidence of a systemic problem that affects airlines, airports, and transportation hubs across the country. Jasmine clicked to the next slide, which showed statistics on disparities in security screenings based on race. "These numbers tell a clear story," she continued. "But behind each statistic is a real person with dignity that deserves to be respected. My hope is that what happened to me can serve as a catalyst for change, not just at SkyWest, but throughout the industry." The audience erupted in applause as Jasmine concluded her remarks, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Among them was Beatrice Thompson, the retired principal who had stood up for Jasmine that day at the gate. She had been invited as a special guest to witness the changes her act of allyship had helped inspire. As the applause faded, Terrence returned to the microphone. "Before we conclude today's meeting, I want to address the consequences for those directly involved in the incident." The room grew tense again as Terrence continued. "After a thorough investigation, Flight Attendant Melissa Bailey has been terminated from her position with SkyWest Airlines. Gate Agent Harold Peters has been suspended for 30 days and will undergo extensive retraining before returning to his duties." Terrence paused before adding, "However, this isn't just about punishing individuals. It's about acknowledging that they were operating within a system that enabled their actions. We all bear responsibility for that system, myself included." He then turned to a more positive note. "I'd also like to recognize those who demonstrated the values we should all aspire to. Officer James Wilson, who expressed concern about the treatment Jasmine received, has joined our security training team as a consultant. And Ms. Beatrice Thompson, who stood up for Jasmine when no one else would, has agreed to serve on our newly formed passenger advocacy board. Beatrice nodded graciously from her seat in the front row as scattered applause acknowledged her contribution. Change doesn't happen overnight, Terrence concluded. But it does happen when we commit ourselves to doing better, to being better. Thank you all for being part of this journey forward. As the meeting adjourned, employees filed out with a new sense of purpose and accountability. Many approached Jasmine to express their support or share their own experiences. Others sought out Beatrice to thank her for her courage. 3 months later, Jasmine found herself boarding another SkyWest flight, this time to attend an aviation conference where she had been invited to speak about her experience and the changes it had inspired. As she approached the gate, she noticed something different, a new, diverse team of gate agents greeting passengers with genuine warmth, clear signage explaining passenger rights in multiple languages, and a QR code directing travelers to the passenger advocacy office if they experienced any concerns. Flight attendant Lisa Alvarez, who had shown Jasmine kindness on that difficult flight to Atlanta, recognized her immediately. Ms. Washington, she greeted Jasmine with a smile. It's wonderful to see you again. Your keynote speech is the highlight of the conference program. Thank you, Jasmine replied, returning the smile. And please, call me Jasmine. As she settled into her seat, Jasmine reflected on how her traumatic experience had evolved into something powerful and transformative. The Jasmine Washington initiative had already been adopted by 2 other major airlines, with more in discussions. Her social media campaign had caught the attention of federal lawmakers, who were now considering legislation to address discrimination in travel. Most importantly, she hadn't allowed fear to dim her passion for aviation. If anything, the experience had strengthened her resolve to enter the field and continue pushing for change from within. The scholarship her father had established in her name would help other young people of color do the same. As the aircraft began its takeoff roll, Jasmine looked out the window at the sprawling airport below. The journey toward true equality and justice was like air travel itself, sometimes turbulent, occasionally delayed, but always moving forward toward distant horizons. And just like that day 1 month ago when she boarded her flight to Atlanta with renewed determination, Jasmine Washington knew that this was only the beginning. What do you think about the changes implemented by SkyWest Airlines? Would you like to see similar initiatives adopted by other companies? Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Have you or someone you know ever stood up against discrimination like Beatrice did? We'd love to hear your experiences. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, one voice can spark a movement that changes everything. This powerful story reminds us that racial profiling remains a pervasive reality in America today, affecting even those with privilege and connections. Jasmine's experience illustrates how bias can transform ordinary activities, like reading a magazine or taking photos, into suspicious behavior when viewed through a prejudiced lens. The consequences are both immediate and far-reaching, causing trauma while reinforcing systemic inequities. Yet the story also demonstrates the impact of allyship. When Beatrice Thompson spoke up, she showed how individual actions can disrupt discrimination. Terrence's response highlights the importance of accountability. Not just punishing individuals, but addressing the systems that enable bias. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's transformation from victim to advocate reveals how adversity can become opportunity. By channeling her painful experience into positive change, she created impact far beyond her individual case. The ultimate lesson is that combating racism requires action at all levels: individual courage, corporate accountability, and systemic reform. When these forces align, meaningful change becomes possible, not overnight, but through persistent, principled effort that recognizes both the humanity of those affected and the responsibility of those with power to create more just institutions.